So Donald Stojack and Richard Kielbon are going to kind of go back and forth today. Richard is kind of like my resident bookshelf, and we have we have landed on something that I think is worth picking apart. And Richard is really good at mapping things out kind of in logical sequences. And so that's kind of one of his strong suits. With his architectural background, he likes putting all the things in nice little lines in places like that. But the big topic that we're going to kind of pull apart today is being the best. It's things like it's so obvious. And so we're going to kind of, I think we're going to talk at this from a few perspectives that I think will help all of us. In other words, how do we approach ourselves being the best? Okay. And how do we leverage that, or how to nuance that? But also, if we understand that in the marketplace, we're going to understand how to attract people to us a little bit more concretely. Does that make sense? So it's like, and the question that Janelle posed about, maybe even stretching out our content for the year. I mean, how, and I think sometimes we get lost in that. Sometimes like, well, what is that? How do we, because does good to put a bunch of content out there if it's not going to do something for you, right? And so you want to put stuff out there that's going to do the most for you. And I think what Richard has landed on here will give us some insight to that, is my thought.
Do I have my mic turned? I do. My mic's on.
Yay. Let me see if we can, two old guys can do this.
Well, yeah, Donald's right on. One thing you might be picking up here is this is an interactive thing in that this isn't a preaching session. There's a famous lady, her name's Twyla Tharp. She's a famous dance choreographer, and she did a dance thing in the theater that bombed terribly. It was a complete disaster, and she had a month to fix it. And the way she did that was to get a committee of judges, people that are qualified to give her opinions, not criticisms, but rank the thing 1 to 10. That's terrible. This is a 5. That's a 7. This is kind of what we're doing today. Donald and I have some ideas, but we're looking for, that's kind of a stupid idea, or, that really kind of hits the target. So that's sort of what we're doing today. Donald, can I share a screen to begin with?
You should be able to try, give it a shot. If not, I can. Yay.
Oh, now I got to adjust my screen here so I can. What am I doing? Okay, I'm a little picture on the right, and you guys are. I'm struggling here to get mine square. Okay. The progression of thought is this. And when I do,
and Richard, if you on the bottom there, hit that little negative thing on the right, bottom right.
Is there something there that's,
yeah, so it'll make your image come into tune with our screen here.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. One more.
Well, I don't want to show the whole map at once because it's hard to read.
Okay. Yeah.
It'll be too hard to read. So I just want to get to where oops, too much. You can read that, or is that still too
small? That's good.
Okay. And what the thinking when I'm working with ChatGPT like everybody else, and when I'm a business coach, business executive coach, and when I look at my target market, ChatGPT tells me that the primary thinking or idea of my target business people is they want to be the best at what they're doing, or they want to beat the competition at what's going on. In other words, they want to be the top of the tribe. But my thinking is, my research tells me there's a couple of problems with that. One is that can lead to perfectionism, which means you're working on all kinds of stuff that's not important. You're working on everything instead of picking one thing to work on. And the other thing is, well, some people want to be better than the competition, but the thing that I was thinking is, by merely being the best, by only just wanting to do that, I keep jumping around. You're still a commodity. In other words, you're some percent better than everybody else, but you're always having to defend your position. If you're the best basketball player today, you might not be next month. If you're the best at whatever you're selling, somebody's always coming after you. So you're still in the commodity market.
Coca-Cola versus Pepsi.
It's a nonstop.
Yeah.
It's a nonstop battle. So what's the answer? The answer, from what I've been understanding and reading, what if you could be uniquely satisfying to your customer? And something I've read recently is, instead of, a minimum viable product, how about a minimal lovable product? In
Mm,
other words, if you could be uniquely lovable and attractive to your company, and the only way to do that, and we're going to talk through that, which is part of this, by providing something surprising and therefore, I said it, unique. Now, in the world that we live in, of your customer and your business consultant, there are things your customers know they don't know. And, Evan will talk about this. Find people who are looking for something. They know they want something and they're looking for it. They're searching. But maybe they're searching in the wrong place. I know as an architect, I do a special process called breakthrough thinking, where the goal is, my clients almost invariably, what they want isn't the best for them. What they want is what they, it's that old adage, give them what they want and then, or sell them what they want and then give them what they need. So a lot of people focus on the wrong problem by searching. So what do we do to break that cycle of not just wanting to be the best? Well, there's a whole category of things called things your customers don't know they don't know. And I think Donald and I did a little presentation on this a month ago or so. How do you
yes.
find what people don't know they don't know? A couple of people are talking about this in the press, in the literature now. Challenger Sales talks about researching people or getting into the anthropology of how their organization works and finding out what they're not paying attention to. Leonard Cohen, as we all know, says there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. So what are we talking about there? Annie Duke is kind of famous because she was a professional gambler who wrote a book, Thinking in Bets. Life is a game of poker, not chess. Somebody asked earlier, do you plan your 5 years ahead of time? That sort of answers the question. If you think life is a chess game, you plan it out 5 years. If you think life is a game of poker, you sort of respond one issue at a time. So how do we use uncertainty to our advantage? Let me read something. Tadao Ando is an extremely famous architect. He's in Japan and he's won every award there is to win. He couldn't afford to go to college. So to survive, he was a professional boxer when he started out his career. And he said, in boxing, you must risk moving into danger in order to fully take advantage of your skills and eventually win the match. New building projects require the same mentality. Taking that extra step forward into the unknown is vital. And then finally, there's a book I love called How to Do Things You Hate by Peter Hollins. What we're talking about, what the theme of this is then, things you don't know, and how you, in life, in this business of coaching and so on, how we move into the getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and looking for things, being the agent, being the person who helps people see things they don't know. So that's kind of the theme of this discussion that we want to discuss today is, how comfortable are you with this topic? Does it make sense in the things you're doing? Does it apply to your life? Does it apply to what you're trying to do as a coach? Or are we just sort of blowing smoke here in the air? Anyway, that takes me through the thinking that Donald and I have been talking about the last couple of days. And I'll sort of leave it at that for a while and let Donald kind of respond. Donald, should I leave the mind map up or make that go away, or kind of?
Let's kind of make that go away. We'll come back to it if we need it. Does everybody kind of grab onto that? And I was so many examples. I'm going to throw out a few examples that kind of come to mind. And you saw on the Facebook page, I posted a picture of my granddaughter climbing in the stairs. So if you step back and look at this from a lot of perspective, you kind of go, oh, like, why does she climb the stairs? Right? Why do we climb the stairs? To get to the top? And what's at the top? Right? So she wants something at the top. And so all of us, like, we're climbing think about that. You're all climbing, we are all, or the people we're talking to are climbing some kind of a stairs. Chris, when you work with people in your realm, they want to go up a level, in their positions. They're climbing some stairs. They want to be the best. They want to be better. They're reaching. That's what's driving. Does that make sense? That's what's driving them. And so we're looking for what is at the top of the stairs. So maybe that, Richard, would that be a fair thing to say? if we can find out what is pulling them up the stairs or what's pulling us up the stairs.
Well, the fair thing to say, your granddaughter, kids they don't know anything. So they're just reaching.
Or they know everything and we're just not.
Oh, okay.
Right? Everything
The
I
real
learned,
theme of the thing is,
everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten,
yeah, right. That book.
or remember Art Linkletter, for those of
Yeah,
us who
that
are
was,
old enough,
oh yeah.
kids say the darndest things.
Uh,
Well, because they say the truth. It's just right in front of you.
well, what I've learned in the field of creativity and so on is being on learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable is extremely important. And I found it hard to bring my clients there. I have some people who I do my workshop and they just hate it. And then I have others who just love it. And there's this whole thing in between. The people who love it are more eager to step out a little bit. So in others, willing to be the best, notching it up 10 or 15%, that's comfortable. But taking a left turn while you're at the top, that's not comfortable. Becoming unique, doing something that isn't on the playing field right now, that's the discomfort that you need to step into to be creative. And in terms of our clients, there are ways to make people feel kind of comfortable. We're in a leadership position where our job is to make them feel comfortable stepping off the edge. And so to be better, rather than 10, 15, 30% better and beat the competition that way, let's take a left turn and find something unique that nobody has. Let's do something surprising. Let's do something that's not just better, but, well, unique's the word for it.
In marketing, one of the things that we are always looking for in any offer is the unique mechanism.
Yeah.
So for yourselves, and if you're working with a client in this realm, gosh, Chris, I think even you're with the branding with that stuff, and ultimately somebody's got to stand out. So if we're digging to that unique mechanism, so how does that fit in? How, as opposed to if it doesn't have a uniqueness about it, there is a higher possibility of being commoditized, right? And if you ever, if you talk, let's dive into price, right? You talk to somebody about price, and they say, well, this person over here, I mean, come on, you're out of range with the other people I've talked to or my other options. Okay, basically what they're saying to you is, you haven't shown me how you're different. You haven't shown me how you're unique. You haven't really shown me how you stand out above the rest. That makes sense?
I would add to that by saying that the uniqueness has different attributes, right? So the question is like, what is unique? Because you say on the pricing side, the pricing piece is unique for sure, because if I charge a certain amount that was less than what I charge, people would say, well, that doesn't make any sense. How is it that like it wouldn't be congruent, if you will,
Yeah.
with what I'm offering and who I'm targeting? They wouldn't buy into that. They'd be like, well, you're focusing on these people, these executive level individuals. Why would you charge that? So the pricing is one piece of it. But what are the other questions? I mean, the question that arises for me is, what is this uniqueness piece? What are the attributes of uniqueness that have to be understood, seen, and owned ultimately, so that we can show up in the way that's right for how we want to represent ourselves?
Yeah.
One of the ways I get at that is whoever you're dealing. The way I deal with it in architecture is we look at, in a business, people like to write that big, this is what my company is about, that big blanket statement. But what I work with is purposes plural. When I develop a project, I look at I get a mind map and I develop a whole array of purposes. So you have granularity, and you have components. And what I find is, for instance, if someone has a complaint about something, that's a good starting place, because you can flip a complaint around and say, what purpose is not being satisfied by that complaint? And people are aware of their purposes. They're aware of what they're trying to drive to. They just don't know how to get an answer to that. So I find in every problem I'm dealing with as an architect, but I'm constantly thinking about business. For instance, when cell phones first came out, I'll use this example, and I'm practicing this process in my head. I'm thinking, what could the purpose of a cell phone be? It didn't take me long to start thinking, gosh, this could be an extension of human faculties, an extension of human skills. This should be an extension of everything we are as a human. Well, that didn't exist back then. It was a flip phone, right? None of that existed. And what did Apple do? They did that. They went to that higher purpose and found those extensions. For people who are, if you're in business and you're trying to understand your client, how you identify those uniquenesses is look at all the micro purposes, the granular purposes people are trying to accomplish, and places where that's not happening, and look for creative ways to get to that. So the answer to your question is kind of in granularity. That's you run to granularity instead of looking for my company's purpose is sentence, but you look at the granularity of everything that's happening underneath you, and you look for places that there's blank spots. There's people not addressing things.
So one question for you, Richard, because what you're describing there sounds like creating a hierarchy of purpose.
Yes.
Which could be also tied to pain points, right? The hierarchy of pain points, a hierarchy of purposes. So my question back to you then would be, I like that. And how do you, what's the map of purpose that you see in terms of what are the levels? Like you mentioned granularity, which I think is true, but like what are the different levels of purpose
Such a good
that
question.
we can unpack?
I wish I could find a mind map to open for you. Oh my gosh. The reason I like the mind map is you can do several things in a mind. One is create floating topics that don't come from the center. So two things to answer your question. First off, you start by just being messy. You don't start by finding the organization. That's the beauty of a mind map and this kind of thinking is people want to start in an organized way. What am I trying to do? But you limit your thinking that way. We start very disorganized. What's the purpose for this? What's that? What's this? What's that? We just throw it on a mind map. Later, we try to organize it. So it will fall into components where 5 or 10 purposes fit in a component of purposes. It will fit in a hierarchy where some are higher than others. And so the answer to your question is start messy. Just get some stuff on a piece of paper. Look for the organization later. The organization will become apparent. Now, the hierarchy question, that's a really interesting one. What most people do is do a really good job of solving the wrong problem. And by the wrong problem, I mean one that doesn't reach far enough. This is kind of a silly example, but I use when Microsoft Word, when Word came out, it was a word processing software. What is the purpose of word processing? It's to communicate. What's the purpose of communicating? It's to network with other people. What's the purpose of networking other people? So we can multiply our efforts. What's the purpose of multiplying our efforts? So we can see the people in Microsoft moved pretty quickly from word processing to work groups. They found the higher purpose. The way you're more profound in your creativity is to search for and look for the higher and broader the purpose you can find, the more creative you can be. You can find lots of ways to create a work group. You can only find a few ways to create a word processor. So when you go from work groups, and now we're on the internet and now we're into AI, the purposes we're reaching for get broader and broader, and the ways to do that get more and more creative. So hierarchies, so that you're solving the highest possible problem, and components, so that you know what your parts and pieces are to go after.
Well, that's one of the things that I found is that with a lot of my clients, what happens is that they are not pointing to the most strategic value, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of pointing here when they should be pointing up here, and so there's a gap.
Yeah.
It's at one level versus the larger opportunity, or they make a presumption of what they're talking about, that, oh, well, people will just understand. It's like, no, they won't get it. You gotta be explicit with people to tell them exactly what you do, because otherwise people are not going to remember it. They aren't going to see it. They're not going to guess. They're not going to try and figure you out. And so that can become a challenge. I guess my question back is if we look at this idea of uniqueness and standing out from the competition, I guess, what are the attributes then of the uniqueness? Because there's a hierarchy piece, but what are the attributes that we have to begin to unpack? Price being one,
Well,
like
I'm kind of a college basketball fan. you can't, I know in the press likes to say that's, Michael Jordan's the best, but he's not. Look, in college basketball, you're the 3-point guy, you're the wing, you're the guy who the shot blocker, you're the you know how to move your feet the best. You've got a uniqueness that you've got. So in terms of your business, you look at one of the questions I ask when I'm designing something is what are your unique resources? What do you bring to the table that nobody else has? What can you bring that other people can't bring? And how far can you reach with that? If you want that particular skill, are you able to practice 50 hours a week really? Or do you not another skill that you can get at 20 hours a week? So one of the keys to breaking everything down in components is one of the reasons this architect, Tadeo Ando, is so famous is he understands architects always got a budget, and he understands clearly you can't do everything. He's very good at discarding everything except that one uniqueness that represents that project. So one of the reasons for looking at all your unique purposes isn't just to find the good one, but to put a lot of them aside. Do you have the resources to do that or not? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the tools it takes to work on that thing? If you don't, put it aside. Your uniqueness is that one thing where you bring resources that nobody else has.
And I think, as we impact that, how do we practically play that out? And I think that word resources plays into that as well. So think about when somebody does talk to you, it's what they see. It's not what they see on the surface, right? It's everything that you're connected to, all the things that you've got access. I mean, Richard, every time I talk to you, it's not talking to you. I'm basically have access to all those books on your shelf. And I've got access to the things that I don't see, all the people that you've met over the years, all of the experiences that you've had, so part of a uniqueness, what are the circles that you've been in? All the, we all love those Venn diagrams where they all overlap, but ultimately each human being has a circle. That's how LinkedIn works, right? You got all, everybody that you're connected with, you then become connected to their circles and the overlap. So Chris, some of that uniqueness is very subjective in how it can play out for somebody. And I think the danger sometimes is we look somebody doing something that we think is similar to us, and we're saying, well, I see them doing that, so if I just duplicate their message, somehow that might work for me. And it's not it at all, right? My friend David Bennett here in the call, he's a forensic CPA. It's you can't get any more granular than that. But that alone is not it. When you start to get to know him and understand some of the places that he's been that are just crazy. You know what I mean? They're just like, from Saudi Arabia to, that's what makes it play out. And sometimes we discount things too fast, or I think that the big money thing here is we're solving the wrong problem. And that
could be one thing for sure, that we're not seeing what problem we're solving.
Yeah.
I want to build upon your sharing, Donald, and just like I just was doing some brainstorming around things of like what are some of the things that can be part of the uniqueness. I'd love to get other people's thoughts too about what people think of that they see as being unique. But a few things I'll just toss out, like your network, your approach to whatever problem you're solving, the problem you're solving itself, your style, right? Your personality, framework, like how you kind of think about things and how you organize information within a given context, your skills, your domain knowledge, like the things that you really excel at, but you have some practical skills, your experience within certain industries, right? That's also relevant as well. So I guess those are some of the things that I see as bad. I'm curious to know what the group thinks, and Richard, what you think, and Donald, like what other things can we begin to kind of lay out that are these uniqueness components, if you will?
Sometimes it can be, Chris, I think, Peter Drucker's phrase that is often quoted is culture trumps strategy. And so, part of it, I think a uniqueness that we overlook sometimes is our culture and how we bridge that to a market's culture or a potential client or a current client, right? So the effectiveness oftentimes in a conversation comes down to that matching of culture, because that makes some things work that would otherwise not work. I've witnessed this week, and actually this morning, a bumping of cultures in a major way that caused a disruption in a project, because we're working across a few continents and values are different. And, assumptions were made based on what we thought were shared values. And we realized very, how do I say, black and white this morning, that wasn't true. And human beings can kind of come together, and we can certainly find our commonalities, but we've also got to recognize we have vast differences. Janelle and I go back and forth because we both live out here in the Puget Sound area, and so there's some parts of us we can relate to it. We drive up and down the same roads, right? But on some aspects, not, because she's got a background of her ex being involved in the military and stuff, and I don't, right? And so that we have parts of our culture that match and parts that don't, type of thing, right? So it's recognizing those things as well, and sometimes those are unspoken.
Well, Chris, you ask a super good question. There's one. I am not a highly successful coach. I'm working at it. I've been working at this for a couple of years. One of the things Donald and I, in a presentation we did a month ago, talked about, the idea of the individual genius is a myth. Those guys don't exist. They all exist within a network of support. And one of the things Donald and I have been exploring, which I'm really excited about, is not presenting myself as an individual, but presenting myself as someone who has access to a big system of other people. In other words, the more people I meet and the more developing in my world a network of people that I can reach out to. So when I'm talking to a business person, I'm not talking about me. I'm saying, you talk to me, you have access to 10 heads. We'll work all this all out together. That's a uniqueness that I don't think a lot of coaches are doing. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. But the question you asked about how do you present, this is a coaching forum, and the theme that I'm taking a little sidestep here, but I want to finish. The theme is, as a business, you're talking to a business person, and there's things you don't know. You'll never find those things without outside involvement. Bring people in from the outside, and that's me. Bring in 10 people from the outside, and that's me and my network. There are things you're blind to, and you'll always be blind to. The people in your organization, you're in a culture where you all think in the same way, kind of. You're all sort of supporting each other in the same sort of notions. But as a business person, what a coach can, I'm not a consultant. I'm not coming to you with a packaged solution. I'm a coach coming to you from the outside, looking at your stuff, asking questions, bringing my support network to you so that we can look for something that you don't see yet. So that's a uniqueness that I'm working on in terms of my coaching practice. And you mentioned a whole lot of other things, your personality, your background, your skills, and so on. But one of the keys in this little presentation is what did I say? Lovable. We know that people are so emotional. So we talk about the technical things I'm unique in, but where am I lovable as a coach? What emotional triggers can I pull that makes me lovable and attractive to a client?
We'll have to add in like a lovability quotient. How do you what to have that as like a metric?
An LQ. We'll invent that and write a book, the LQ.
Yeah. David, you're so polite with your hand up. Come on.
Well, I certainly don't want to interrupt any of the other August members of this group. So, you can tell from my accent, I'm just a poor old country boy. But one of the things I bring forward in coaching a lot of times is when I talk with a businessman or an owner, he already has a bunch of advisors. But what we find a lot of times with advisors is like economic experts. They're pointing 14 different directions. And the example I always use is you have an investment advisor that wants you to make a lot of money. And you have your CPA that doesn't want you to make so much money because he doesn't want you to pay a lot of taxes. So the two of them, there's got to be you work to find a middle ground between the two of them that works for you. And that's what you can offer sometimes as a coach, is you can come in as a referee for the advisors that are having different opinions and try to craft a solution that's unique to the problems the guys or gals facing. Does that make sense to you?
And I think that goes along with, some things are more valuable. It's like that striving to be the best. Maybe we don't need each one to be at 100%. In other words, we could some of the components, we're trying to get them all greased and oiled, and some of them would work just fine dry and rusty, right? So we focus on the wrong stuff.
Well, I have read someplace in the past that sometimes being number 2 in the market is much more profitable.
But okay, yes, absolutely. And if profit is the most important thing for you,
Right.
then run for. But you see, maybe ego is the most important thing for you, and you could care less about the money. I mean,
Which is another nice thing about uniqueness. By
Yeah,
searching for your uniqueness, you no longer have to try to get there by being the top. You
yeah.
can have your pride, and that's very satisfying to be unique, because that's a very, ego-friendly concept. I'm like this, nobody else is. I don't have to be the top because nobody has this that I
think
have.
what was that? That one of those shows on TV where they have people audition. And remember that guy a few years ago that was so bad, but he went viral. He was so bad. I mean,
Yeah,
in other words, his strength was he was horrible.
Yeah.
Right. It was just like
That's true.
It's funny because I actually ran across somebody that had him as a client, a CPA that was he was her client. So what was his name? It escapes me. I can see his face, but
Yeah, he was horrible, and he got famous for being
yeah,
horrible.
you all know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Oh.
I do.
Eric, you look anxious with your hand raised there.
Yeah. Well, by the way, remember I'm going to date myself.
She-bang. What's the guy name?
Go.
What's his name? Hung?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're close. Just
William
remember the
Hung.
popularity.
William Hung?
Yeah, that's close. Remember the popularity of the Gong Show back in the day.
Yeah.
Just remember it. Most of you probably don't know that, but it was hugely popular. Anyway, I was just going to say along these lines, and I heard this recently, and it knocked me out. That does a chess player become a grandmaster by only studying the chessboard, or by getting to know themselves? And you can take that to any music. In other words, it's great to be able to play your instrument in all the scales faster than anybody else on the planet. But if you don't have something to say when you play it, who's going to come and listen to you?
If a tree falls in a concert hall and the right audience isn't there, what kind of a noise does it make?
Well, I'm a musician. I have a Miles Davis story. I watched his bio and I was surprised by it because I'm a trumpet player. I love him to death. It was the bebop era. Well, all the trumpet players were seeing how fast they could play and how much they could improvise and how much stuff they could put on the page. Charlie Parker and everybody they're making lots of notes. Miles Davis said, I don't want to do that. I didn't know he took that turn. He wanted to be unique. He said, I want to play things that are more accessible to my target audience. I want to slow down. I want to play things they can get. In so doing, he made himself completely unique. He's the guy who drove the Maseratis and Ferraris in the 50s when everybody else was, barely surviving. He didn't become the best. He's not the best trumpet player. There's some people I can name who he was very unique and he was very special and no one could duplicate him. He didn't try to be the best. All of us must have some corollary to that in our lives.
So that's what we're looking for. Does that help everybody out? I don't want to confuse you here. We've kind of thrown a lot out. And there, full disclosure, I mean, Richard and I, we go back on this stuff all the time and geek out on it. I was the other example that, as I was talking with Richard the other day, came to mind. I walked into Costco a few weeks back and there's winter coats, right? So what do? I bought the same winter coat I bought 4 or 5 years ago. $30 at Costco, the Kirkland brand. And the current one, I mean, it looks just like my other coat, except on the inside, there's not it's missing a pocket that my old one has. Now, my old coat still works. It's not tattered by any stretch of the imagination, but I've had it for 5 years. Make sense? It's like, I mean, you can tell when you put your hands in your pocket, yeah, this coat's 5 years old, but come on, walking down the street, it still looks the same. But Costco got another $30 for me.
I'll tell you something else that is odd about not being the best is and Richard made me think about it because he's talking about music, is Chris Christopherson. Chris Christopherson is not the best singer by any stretch of the imagination. But how many records has the guy sold? But he's unique in his approach to it.
And then there's Willie Nelson talking about
Willie Nelson, that's right. Johnny Cash, he can't sing. He speaks most hits.
Yeah.
So
Keith Richards, just want to add that.
Yeah. So it just like step back in your world and think, what am I, when you do something, why am I picking up that grapefruit? Why am I buying that piece of clothing? Right. And just stop. I do this because I'm in sales and marketing, right? It's like I'm just always picking this stuff apart because it just fascinates me. Why did I just do that? So, I mean, Tom, to that thing, I mean, why did Donald just buy that crazy big pickup truck? Just like, why did I do that? I could have bought a less pickup truck and still got the job done, right? But why? I'll tell you, when I pull up to the barn with that pickup truck, everybody stops, right? It's just like, what's pulling up to the barn, right? So why do we do that? And if you stop for a moment and think of that makes sense from that perspective. And then, like when you're talking with somebody and when you're looking at the marketplace, generating connections, conversations, okay, that's what you're pulling in. Tracy and I had a conversation the other day with her market, to just kind of defining out and where is that center of the target for her that she could tap into. Does that make sense, Tracy? Does this kind of fit into that? Do you see how that kind of works? It's like, where is that marketplace? There again, we can help anybody. Right. And everybody needs our help. But where can what we're doing match up and getting them coming in at maybe bigger numbers?
Well, one of the things I discovered, I learned breakthrough thinking from Gerald Nadler, who's a USC an industrial design professor. And when he does breakthrough thinking and he's looking for purposes, he's talking about technical stuff almost always. How does that gear hook to that lever? But as an architect, I got frustrated early because people weren't playing that game quite the way I thought they should. What I discovered was people have emotional purposes. People have things they're trying to accomplish emotionally. They want feelings they're trying to get at. There's a perception they want to have of themselves. So because architecture is both art and technology, those emotional issues, why would somebody, instead of wanting to be best in the market, want to be the most unique? Because there's an emotional satisfaction there. Instead of being the best, there's a different emotional satisfaction that comes from being unique in the marketplace. But this is about being a coach and our coaching. Our job is to help people discover those things, help make them comfortable so that we can have those discussions and go to uncomfortable places, but hold their hands and make them feel like we can get them there productively. So that sort of answers what you're talking. You had an emotional reason to buy that coat the second time, Donald.
No, it's fully logical.
It's fully logical.
Well, because logically, if you walk into Costco and it's there, you better get it because it might not be there.
It might not be there again, right?
Yeah, it's all emotional. Every day, Well, my dog is emotional today because it's raining outside and she doesn't want to run outside in the rain, so she's being emotional today.
Yeah,
nothing worse than an emotional golden retriever.
Well, for anybody else listening today, is there a hole in the? Give me ranking 1 to 10. Did we hit something? We got a 7. We're on something good, or gee, it's a 3. As you're just talking in the wind, or I know a couple people out there. We got something interesting we can use as a coach, or we just talking to each other?
Well, Carly gives you 9.5, and she's a pretty rough grader. So if I know Carly, and Carly, why a 9.5?
Because right now my brain is going like a mile a minute and I have multiple ideas.
Yeah, but this help you out? This brings some
Yes.
insight. Yeah. Eric 9.9. Whoa.
Oh gosh. Why isn't it a 10, Eric?
Yeah, because because I'm tuning it and it's not quite in tune yet.
I see. Okay.
Hmm. Nancy, what makes it a 9 for you?
A lot of this stuff, it just fascinates me, and it's right along the lines of what I think of. But you brought in so many pieces that I hadn't thought of, sort of evaluating and adding into the mix. I think I had it intuitively in another way, but like, you're not just bringing yourself and your uniqueness, but all the books you've read and your network. And your colleagues.
Mhm.
And I gave it a 9 because instead of a 10, because it's a little overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, do I need to listen back and just pick this apart and then add it, add, subtract, multiply. So yeah, I get a little overwhelmed.
And Nancy, you and Richard are kindred souls as far as geeking out on detailed knowledge. You guys should schedule a conversation. Jean-Luc is another 9, but Nancy comes in at a Tracy comes in at a 10. Tracy, what is making this a 10 for you?
Well, this just really speaks to me as far as I feel so strongly about the uniqueness of my whole approach is like it's anti-diet culture, but and so it's like diet culture tends to be one size fits all. And it's like, this is absolutely not the truth. And so to me, it's like, this is, how do I take that? And this verbiage really speaks to me about helping, not just for myself, focusing on being unique instead of being the best, which that's been my, and I hadn't used that verbiage, but that's what I've been aiming for anyway, but to help my clients see that, because in diet culture, the best is thin and fit. And it's like, that's not necessarily that's how you get to your ideal place in your relationship with food and your body. And that's your unique journey. That's not a one size fits all. So this is just really speaking to so many things. And I love all the music metaphors, because goodness knows some of the wealthiest musicians in the world are far and away not anywhere near the best musicians in the world. And it's like, just take that out of the equation. But what makes them successful? What is working for them, what's speaking for them, and then finding those correlations in what we're doing and what we're helping our clients to do.
They're not the best on they're not the best on some scales, but on the scale of making money or popularity, they are. So when it comes to art, it's kind of subjective type of thing. Jean-Luc, so Jean-Luc, this is resonating for you?
Yeah, it is. So to be unique, I am unique in a lot of ways. And then I had a client that I did for it, and today was just a recap 3 weeks later, and a lot of nice comments from her and stuff that I taught her. And it's like reminded me, this is resonating to how do I sort this out, right? To make my uniqueness shine. So it's pretty cool.
Good. Excellent. Very good. Thanks everybody for your insights. Chris, very good going back and forth too. I knew this would be a kind of like a very good sideways too for the kind of stuff that you're doing, working with clients and stuff as well. It's just spot on and right there. So Richard, thank you for spurring our conversation today, and much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is so much fun, Donald. And thank you, sir, for doing this unique person thing every week. It's a treasure. I'm just so thankful you're doing it.
Thank you.